remember that the show that we did last year, that you did last year, that was probably the best live improv show that I've ever seen.
Oh, that's really
It
nice.
was absolute joy to watch.
Thank you.
Uh, that was the first time your kids had ever seen you perform. Is
It
that true?
was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sure was.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like, what did they think of you as an improviser? What did they know about what your career's been like? And can you talk a little
Well,
bit about
they're 12 and 14, and they have just kind of, over the years have slowly become aware, like that I did sketch comedy and that Bob and I have done comedy on stage, and of course we've done lots of shows. And there's a very funny story I like to tell. When they were very little, probably 2 and 4, I think, and we were in San Francisco doing a show, and a very good friend of ours was watching them at the hotel, and it was a big treat because they were getting to watch their iPads late or whatever. And I checked in just before we went on stage, and sitter said, everybody's doing good. There was a fire and we had to evacuate the hotel. But we've, after, a lot of trial and error, we made it back into our room and everything's okay. And I'm like, what?
that?
Of course, and then we had to, like, literally lights went up and I had to go up on stage. And then when we got home, the kids were just too wound. It was like 11:30 and they were too little to be up that late. They were just so wound, and talking about a stranger had to carry my daughter down because the elevator was working and the sitter could only
Gosh.
take one of them. And I guess the fire had, the kitchen had caught on fire or whatever.
Oh
Anyway,
my goodness.
so that there we're always like, remember when you were doing your show and fire? Because you and Daddy like to do your comedy. So they always had this working knowledge of what it was, very unimpressed. We're a very bit heavy family, so there's a lot of, bits floating around. But they'd never really, I don't think, and they knew what improv was. They've taken it in school, it's an elective. But to see us kind of sustain a show for a full hour and to actually find it funny, because my son was sitting in the front row and he was genuinely in stitches, which was just
Oh, that must
my
have been
dream.
gratifying.
What was that?
That must have been gratifying for your
Oh,
children to just
I
be
was
so.
milking it so much. I was
Oh,
looking at the little clip that Eric sent out, and it's a very physical clip. And I remember being like, I could hear him and see him laughing so hard. So, man, I'm leaning into it. But yeah, it was great. And I think they had a little bit of like, oh, you know, um, maybe we moved up a tiny peg in their mind of, our capabilities, and that we, are good performers.
I mean, it was a packed house.
Yeah.
All of these people were here to see you. And I know some of your other family were there too, if I remember correctly.
We had
Yeah.
just come from a family reunion. We do it every year, and we were in Junction, which is about 2 hours away. And a lot of my family's from Oklahoma, Virginia. We're kind of scattered, but they were all there, and they're like, "We're coming. We're coming to Austin to see you perform." So the house was full of family, and um, they had never seen us. Some of them had never seen us do a live show too. So it was a good show, but also we had a very friendly audience.
Yes, yes. But I mean, that's wonderful though. It feels good.
It-
I have never had any family see me perform. And I'm a little scared of the idea of them
Oh,
seeing-
it is.
oh, it's
Yeah.
scary.
I'm so different with my family than I am on stage.
Yep.
I feel like my coworkers are like, yeah, that's pretty much what Jessica will be like. Like that's what she is on stage is probably how she is at work. But my family doesn't see that. So it's kind of
Is your family in Austin?
San Antonio.
Oh, San Antonio. Okay,
Yeah.
so they could come and see
They
us.
can come, yeah.
They need to see
They
you
don't.
perform. They need to see this other side of you, because
Right.
I think it'll shift their shift. I think my family had that same thing. I grew up and I was kind of the funny kid. And then when I got into theater, and I feel like the first thing I did was in high school, the first time I tapped into like being funny and comedy. And I think there was a bit of a switch in my family's mind that was like, oh, like maybe she could do this. So they need to see.
Yeah. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the early days for you and what brought you into, man, and a lot of your work has been in sketch, but a little bit about the improv part of your, I guess, education and upbringing.
The journey.
Like the early parts, yeah.
My first exposure to improv was I was in junior college in Odessa, and I had a great theater teacher, and she showed us improvisation, like it was a clip, rolled in the TV and, you know, put in the VCR and was like, so this is a show in Chicago. And I don't even remember what show it was, but she's like, this is entirely made up. And we were like, no, that's improv. And so that was the first time I'd ever even heard of it. And she's like, I want you guys to try it out. And of course it was clunky and whatever, but even in those, and she was kind of dabbling a little bit in everything, kind of exposing us to everything. So we didn't stay with improv very long, but she said early on to me, like, you really need, you really are good at this. You have have a natural inclination to be funny and you seem to respond to this. You really should get to Chicago. She played a really essential role in me getting to Chicago. And then when I was there, I was planning to do traditional theater, and I had moved there with a boyfriend, and he signed us up for improv classes because the acting classes were all full. So it's all kind of just truly improvised, just kind of followed it, and it just kind of happened, and got into it, and it just really responded to me. I was cut out for it. And then from there, kind of kept my finger in the improv scene, and eventually took classes at Second City, found my way eventually onto the main stage there, and was simultaneously taking classes at IO, which I think is really Second City was, very character based, and you're kind of gunning for a stage or to be on a touring company. At IO, you were almost doing it for the love of the craft and to just be on stage on a Saturday night. So it was like, so the best of both worlds. It was really a fantastic experience being in Chicago at that time and watching so many great improvisers. And I think that's also where I learned so much, gleaned so much from just watching so many great improvisers. And that was kind of my trajectory, before I moved out to LA to do sketch.
Going back a little step, you mentioned that you were cut out for it and that your teacher saw something in you that she thought would you should go to Chicago, which I feel like if someone had said that to me, wow, that would have been that would have been huge. Tell me, what do you think it is that she saw, or that? Yeah, go ahead.
So interesting. I think I grew up in West Texas, very kind of a quiet, straight A student kind of gal. A lot of second guessing going on in kind of everything I did in life. Naturally geared to let everybody else's opinions kind of dictate the path that you take a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's true for all of us. That's kind of everybody's life's work, is to learn how to tune into your own voice. But for whatever reason, when you're improvising, you don't have a script to lean on. There's no right or wrong way to play a character, like a role in a written script. And I couldn't second guess myself in those moments. Like, if you were going to succeed at all and be good, and I was an A+ student enough to be like, okay, the task is I have to create a scene and it needs to be funny and I need to connect with people. And so whatever impulses I had to check that box of doing a good scene forced me to not second guess myself. And I really think when it was happening and when I was doing improv, I didn't realize what feeling I was feeling. I couldn't put a name to it, but it really was one of the few places that I had to 100% get behind my choices in order for them to work.
Yeah.
Be 100% confident. And the more confident I was, it didn't matter what character I was doing or what choice I made. I realized it was just the fact that I was making the choice and giving it 110% that people were responding to.
Yeah.
Because I could really embody the character, and I could really embody it, and it just felt so good to be in that space. And then when you get off stage, I could judge myself, and fret about, oh gosh, that choice and that choice, and beat myself up over whatever. But while I was on the stage, you just can't do it if you want to be successful. And so I think she saw me in a light when I was on stage where I was probably my most sure-footed and confident, and thought that's what you need to do.
Do you think that's just like the first element that someone needs to embrace when they start studying improv, is just to be confident in your choices?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think having confidence on just standing on stage, and I think we've all seen it when you see someone who is right out of the gate is either comfortable being on a stage, holding the stage.
Yeah.
And when they're absolutely not, because I know a lot of people, I'm sure you do too, who that's their worst nightmare, is to be standing on a stage and having people look at them. But for us who've been doing it a while, like, we don't even think twice about it.
Yeah.
We're comfortable, walking and inhabiting that space. So yeah, I think that is kind of the first thing you have to do, is be like, all right, this little box is mine.
Mm-hmm.
I can be myself here. No one is going to say, stop, you did that wrong, do it different.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a sacred space. And there's just not a lot of places in life where you can feel that way.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. And I think for a lot of new improvisers, that is the hardest thing, right? They come on to a stage, they know they're funny, they know they have a comedic sensibility, and so they come onto a stage with their funny idea, and they're going to make their funny idea happen, and they don't have any confidence when you actually get on there. There's no confidence, and you're trying to make something work as opposed to letting things happen.
Trusting yourself that you will appear in the moment with a great idea that isn't premeditated, that you will have the right response. And it takes a lot of confidence and trust to be in that space. But I think we all have the capacity to do it. It's letting ourselves play with other people, hear other people's ideas, and create something in the moment. In order to do that, you have to really be willing to say yes to the other person and to not judge what the other person is bringing. And to be a new improviser too, I think when you're seeing it, I think it's hard to realize, like, you're always trying to emulate what other people are doing, and like, oh, this is how it's done, or according to this teacher, this is how it's done. And there are some basic rules that are going to get you farther, and you're going to have more success, just like riding a bike. If you sit on the seat, doesn't mean you always have to sit on the seat, but starting out, if you sit on the seat, you're going to have greater success. And so there are a few rules to follow. But then I think beyond that, once you get that down, the assignment is to hone in on your unique voice and trust it and play from that space. Because I think, and I had success. People were obviously responding to what I was doing on stage when I started out in improv. And I did a lot of characters. I love to emulate people. I'm a bit, that's how I approached my comedy, and it was working, but not everybody did that. And when things would go bad for me is when I would think to myself, I should play more cerebral. There are a lot of really smart, very witty, very funny people that I thought, stop be witty. And that just wasn't what my brand was, or, what I felt comfortable doing. And so it wasn't as successful for me. And I think that would be true for anybody. Is like, if you're trying to perform like someone else instead of yourself, you're probably not going to have as much fun.
For sure.
How did you go through a process of finding yourself when you're surrounded by so many unique people and there's just a lot of noise coming at you, like good noise? There's lots of good people around you, but how do you center on that? Is that part of the task that you mentioned? Because you said that you had that background of being, the A student, the background, and it was a task you're going to. How did you center?
I think my growth came from one show at a time, surprising myself at what I could do. And I continued to go back to that. People, again, my greatest scenes were when I was really plugged in and just performing like me, whatever that meant. And then being like, oh, that worked. That was successful. So the next time you go back and you're just like, I just want to get back into that comfortable headspace of non-judgment for myself, lining up behind my own choices, not questioning myself. It sounds so simple to do, but it really is hard to hone in on your own voice. But that is the task, I think. And, because and you can tell when you're being critical to yourself, you'll get into kind of a negative
Yeah.
space on
Mhm.
stage. I will find myself, if I'm judging what the other person is bringing to the table, I find myself kind of bickering, in the scene. Those are telltale signs, red flags for me that I'm honing in on the wrong things.
Right.
Yeah. Sounds so, I'm sorry, it's kind of untangible advice I'm giving, but
Actually, that's really good advice because it's a specific, the bickering, the going towards the negativity, because a lot of times it's really gauzy and you're thinking,
mm,
well, you need something to glom onto. So that was a good thing to say.
I think one of the reasons I don't feel like I'm a great teacher, I've never really done a lot of teaching, is because I don't think there's one way to do it. And I'm constantly fascinated by improv in how many different ways you can approach a scene. What I do know is I recognize a feeling when I'm on stage,
Mm.
when it's working. And that is what I'm always trying to go after, is that place where you're really plugged in, just the choices and the words are just kind of coming effortlessly because I'm so plugged in with my scene partner. And so I feel like that's what I'm pacing more than anything, and focusing on the scenes that worked and trying to figure out in my mind, why did those work? And a lot of it has to do with saying yes and getting behind your choices, and then not spending too much time beating myself up over the scenes that didn't work. I just know, like, I don't want to go down that road again. I don't want to be standing on stage so bored with my own voice, and we've all been there. So
You came to Austin and you taught with Bob, your husband, and
right.
I felt like it wasn't him teaching and you assisting. I felt like you were a really integral together team. And I really felt like you were a teacher in that. It was very different, your roles, but I very much learned from your example. And you would immediately come in and finish a sentence, or you would immediately come in and add something, and it would buoy up the thought or something like that. So do you think that you're going to make a regular thing of that? Did you find it to be enjoyable?
I found it to be so enjoyable, and I felt slightly guilty because I was hoping that you all got as much out of it as I did, because
Yes,
really it was really great for me as a
absolutely.
and, being able to make, we had some great scenes, and then I made a lot of mistakes, and it was very informative to me, to as an improviser, to remind myself of, like, yeah, you can always still make those stutter steps, and how you recover is really what counts. And thanks for saying that, because it was a new form, and Bob and I are going to try it out again. Um, because he can look at a scene and hone in on a detail of, like, he's kind of got the computer programmer's mind, where it's like, okay, well, here he can point to a moment, or something that you should try to help the program work. I'm not very good at seeing that. I just know it didn't work. Let me start over, and we'll try. I can't really tell you why it didn't. We can all agree it didn't work, but he really does a good job of honing in on that detail, and then I can kind of speak to that. So thanks for saying that. It was really fun to do. And yeah, we are looking forward to doing it again. I think we're going to do that again in Austin. And
Yeah, that's super
I
exciting.
cannot wait. I cannot wait.
oh, good. Thanks. Thanks. It was fun.
Uh, yes, it was great. Got a lot out of that.
We talk a little bit about your ability to build these amazing characters, because that is something that I aspire to. And maybe I'm not a person who does great, like does characters, right? Like you said, you're not necessarily a more cerebral performer. The characters that you've built were wonderful and strange, and I would love to be able to do something like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. And I have to say that, that is what I love doing. And however you are performing, I mean, it's always fun to try on something else. And I think that's a great exercise, where you're forced to play something that you normally don't play, or something that you're not comfortable playing, just because you can surprise yourself with, like, what you're actually capable of,
Yeah.
but I think what holds us back is being afraid of taking a really big swing and looking dumb. The way I approach my characters is, I really have always even when I'm telling a story, I've always kind of emulated people when I'm talking. I'm kind of animated when I do that. And I like to think it doesn't come from a mean place of imitating people, or making fun of people. I feel like it's like, honing in those little human characteristics that make us us,
Mm.
and kind of speak to who we are, and almost, almost mimicking that. That's usually how I, will approach it, because I feel like someone's state of mind always seems to read in how they carry themselves, or
Okay.
how they talk. And it is always for me almost like what their status is in their mind, in their own world. I would say,
Mm,
if I'm breaking it down and I'm not very good at, really over examining something, that is how I get into a character, is probably like, what do they think their status is in the world?
Okay.
And how does that manifest in how they carry themselves? Is this, a harried mother, who thinks she's a great mother and has got lots of advice to, give? Or is she someone, or he someone who has a chip on their shoulder, and how that ends up manifesting in how they carry themselves? Because I am pretty physical. Um, that's kind of how I get into the characters, and I see my kids doing the same. Especially my son is very much a sponge and mimics people as he's storytelling. So I think that's the origins of it. That's kind of how I approach it.
nice.
Yeah, yeah. I was just, I guess, talking more on getting on stage and taking a big swing and failing. I was in a show in New York, and we were doing an improvised play, and it was TJ Jagodowski and Dave Pasquale
Ah,
and John Lutz and Scott Adsit and Bob and me.
Yeah.
And those are some, I mean, um,
mm,
I'm well read, but I would not, I don't usually draw from the academic side of my brain. Maybe, I don't know how else to put that. Everything does come from physically impersonating someone's status, I think. And so anyway, I had been made a doctor right out of the gate, and you want to come off as a doctor, and I didn't want to be a ditzy doctor, or because you can, I wanted to be a very confident doctor, but I'm like, oh my God, doctor speak is not going to fall out of my mouth easily.
Right.
And it was
Right.
terrifying for me to be in a lab coat and a clipboard, and I'm having to walk in and tell these people who I think could be doing a much better job in the doctor role than I would. It was a real challenge for me.
Yeah.
And I just had to stand, get behind the lingo I was putting that made no sense. Like, your defibrillator is about 26,000, and it should actually be at, 150. And, no sense. And I'm sure people in the audience were like, oh my God, she's so stupid. But so I'm with you on, trying things on that are uncomfortable, how important it is as an improviser, and being willing to fail, because a lot of times you succeed and surprise yourself.
just really about deep belief.
Mm.
Yeah.
Goes right back to
Sorry.
that 100% confidence and not wobbling in your convention. It's all those thoughts of like, no one is buying this, can't do this, I'm not capable of doing this, I need to cut this character short. All those thoughts are what will undermine that character work. Nothing that the audience is thinking.
Right.
They don't think it unless you're thinking it. So getting up and lining up again, having that confidence.
Do you think that that scene ultimately went poorly or went well, or did you have a thought about, or did you judge that scene
I
once?
did, yeah, I did judge it. I think it did go well. I found her, and it was a full length play. We did 2 acts, so I had to play the character for the entire, hour and a half
Oh,
show.
that's
Yeah.
intense.
And so that was the big fear of like, I could probably carry this off for 3 minutes for sure. But I'm the deliverer of, I'm a big hinge in this story. And I do think it went good, because it's never really about the career. It's about the connections with everybody else. And those relationships were what made the doctor who she was, not all the lingo and the dialogue and her. I can play power, a high status character. So it did, yeah, it went fine. But I think the only thing that kept it from being brilliant was my own self-judgment of it, because I can tell you, when I got off stage, none of my other castmates were just like, man, we were worried about you. Nobody said that, I
Oh, no.
wouldn't feel that from them. They're too good of improv. If they felt it, they would never, project that on you, whatever. But you're the only one holding yourself back. I don't think anybody else
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. To me, it seems like in my experience with, watching really great improv, you can say the absolute least doctory lingo or just completely make it up and talk about defibrillators and 100,000 cc's or whatever. And if you believe it, it works. And also, I think the audience kind of likes knowing that you don't actually, you clearly don't know what you're talking about and you're just doing it.
Absolutely. Oh,
Yeah.
sure. They want to be in on it. I think I get thrown because there's so many smart people that I've improvised with who just have great, easy access to information that I have never held that important. So I didn't keep any of it.
Mhm.
I've come across it in my education, but it's just not where my mind is interested. And they can pull it out, and it is a talent, and the audience is delighted by the knowledge that they're able to impart. And that is how they play. And I think for me to start feeling like I need to be more like them, or that now I need to put my focus, that is where I'm doing myself and them a disservice, because it's not true to who I am and what my strengths are. And yeah, yeah, nobody's gonna beat you up for not knowing, every literary great giant's work.
Yeah, for sure. Can we talk a little bit about improvising as a woman
Sure.
and what I think exists for a lot of women who improvise is a sense of a little bit of a lack of confidence to jump out on the stage, right? To be the first one on stage. There's a little bit of improv foot sometimes. At least at the start of my experience with improv, my journey with improv, I know I was hesitant and was told more than once, you need to just go out there, you need to just walk on stage and do whatever it is that you're going to do. Was that ever an issue for you?
Um, Yes and no, because I improvised with a team they were called the Lost Jetties, and it was just me and one other woman, which was not unusual in the day to have, like, if you could 1 to 2 women, that was plenty for any improv, team, and it was mostly men. And this was a very physical male improv team that did lots of war scenes. I think every show we
Hmm.
did, we were in some sort of combat, and it was just very testosterone heavy. And I had a great time because I knew what I was working with. And if Katie and I went out and started a scene that was maybe a slower talky scene, it just probably wasn't going to happen. Someone was going to tag us out or jump in or make it whatever. And the more frustrated I would get with that, say after the show, really the worse it, because it wasn't going to change. My lesson in that was, how could I adapt as a performer to play with the group that I've been assigned to play with? And
Right.
things really shined, and I felt like, wow, I can hold my own in any condition. Now, did I struggle with it? Probably yes. I'm sure I did. But then I did an all women's improv team, and that was the salve for whatever I was feeling about that. I have there's a fine line about being improvising as a woman, because I feel like the more time we spend talking about it and highlighting the problem, we're trying to say that the solution comes from everyone around us changing a little
Yeah.
bit to accommodate something. And it's when I do think that the answer just lies within us, because there's a lot of examples of very powerful women who've come out of, I think Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, who are just at the top echelon of the comedy that they do. Again, the confidence thing and turning to yourself to make the change. Does that make sense?
I definitely think it comes from within. I don't think that it's necessarily the other performers in the group that or not but what am I trying to say? That need to play differently to respond to the women in their team. But I think that some women need a little bit, and that might be part of their initial journey as improvisers, is to learn that they can do this and be unapologetic about it, right? To be unapologetically perform and do whatever it is they're going to do without second guessing themselves. So all those things that you had to learn, I guess. And maybe it's true for everyone. It doesn't necessarily apply to just women, but I do feel like some women, and I think that was how I started out, were afraid and would compare myself to men who had no fear, who had no evident fear whatsoever of being on stage. And so there was a little bit of an acclamation. It may well have just been me personally, as opposed to me as a woman.
And
Yeah,
I'm not at all denying that we have a harder job. Like it's,
yeah,
to do this, we don't, I remember being on stage at Second City, and again, it was like, maybe we had, 4 men, 3 women, something like that. But it was always a male dominated, when I was there. It just, had that's just what we were walking into. But I remember struggling so much to get my voice out there my first year on stage at Second City, just in the improv stuff. Like everything was falling flat. I was doubting myself, and I realized I could say the exact same line that Kevin Dorff would say. Literally say it, nothing. Kevin would, just being in the same group mindset, would say it again, and it would just bring the house down. And and it was me not having confidence behind what I was saying.
right.
It wasn't that the audience favored him or more, like that was a real big lesson for me. It's such a delicate subject because I'm not denying, I think like as women, yeah, it can be harder it's changed for sure. We definitely have more women out there playing, but I think we have a bit, and I hate making these broad statements because not everybody lacks the confidence, but I know I certainly did.
Yeah,
I was very timid about it. And I think despite myself, I had success, even though I was a very timid, shy person and kind of quiet when I wasn't on the stage.
Mhm.
And then getting on the stage and having the confidence to hold my own was definitely a challenge, but doable.
Yeah,
And when we come away having gotten our voice out there and realizing like our scene partners, men, women, whoever they are, they just want to play with us at the end of the day.
right.
So that's a great revelation.
You were talking about, for me, I kind of clicked on what you said when you talked about being the doctor and performing with all those great names. And I sort of thought, well, you did fit in nicely with all those names. And the word I thought of was trust. You trust yourself, you trust others, but sometimes you're going into it blind. It's like, how do you trust yourself? How do you trust others? Or do you trust all of them? What do you think about that?
Oh, I think you have to trust across the board.
Yeah.
You're doing yourself a big disservice if you do anything but trust. The subject, just because I feel like I've been talking about it for so many years, because it is something that women perform. There have always been more men performers, more white male performers. I mean, a lot of these dynamics are starting to change. My best friend is Liz Allen Edwards. She's a great teacher, and we both came up at the same time, and we've both had kind of noticed that the women who've really gone the farthest have spent the least amount of time putting much focus on the landscape, the male landscape of it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah,
And to their benefit, because I think it almost distracts from our own work when we're focusing so much on how many men are on stage with us. That change needs to happen, but it's probably going to happen with our success.
yeah,
And being like, women are funny, and letting that build. It's just a sticky subject for me. It's really hard because there definitely are genuine issues to, I was in plenty of scenes where you were always made the mother, and the
yeah,
whatever, that was such an issue. But it also taught me a really great skill of being the most interesting mother, the most complex mother, the mother that drove the scene, that initiated all the complicated
yeah.
stuff. So
That's a good way to say it. Be the
We
most strong, be the
actually,
most interesting.
we
Mhm.
just did a workshop with Jamie Moyer that was all women and
Oh,
women identifying, and it was great. And I think I kind of share your, this is a sticky subject. It isn't necessarily something that I want to dwell on, but it was actually a really wonderful experience to be in a group with a bunch of really talented women. It was all online. But she said the exact same thing. Sometimes you're going to be in a scenario where you're going to be made the mother or the wife. So be that as like confidently and be the weirdest wife that you can be, or the weirdest mother, or the wildest, most outrageous mother that you can, and just milk every second of it.
And have, the most creative
Yeah.
fun you can with it. I think my issue with the subject, and Jamie is a fantastic example of someone who owns her voice. And when you get on stage, she's not going to compromise that voice at all. And people respond to that. Everyone responds to that, despite gender or whatever. And it's really fun to play with, because you feel like you're in great, confident hands. She knows who she is as an improviser. And that's really what we're all striving for, is to know who we are. Introducing some of the subjects that we're talking about, I feel, can place a judgment for yourself on stage. It ties you up so much more than it's tying up the men. So you're having to improvise with a hand tied behind your back because you don't want to be made a mother, or you don't want to be made a girlfriend. And the minute it happens, you've suddenly like got this exhaust, whatever behind it, when really you can make them a mother too. And now it's two mothers talking about, whatever, or, like you forget all the tools that you have in your bag because you're focusing on something else. And again, not to belittle what is going on or to say that that's not what we're dealing with, but just like in every good improv scene, if there's any way we can turn that into a bonus for us, because we're much more stronger improvisers. That was one thing I knew from my experience with the Lost Jetties, and I loved those guys. But I could play on their team, and I could play on the all-women team with women who had very eclectic ways that they improvised, but I could exist in both worlds. I couldn't say the same for them. So it made me a stronger improviser, having access to some of these challenging situations.
That was a really great way to look at it. But I didn't want to interrupt you.
I agree.
We are womening each other so much right now.
Yes. Yeah, that was the other.
In a way, it's really
talk about was the politeness factor. And I don't think this is necessarily a gender issue, because I think other people do it. And I actually think Amoeba, as a troupe, we have struggled with this in the past, where we're too polite to each other. We don't want to step on each other's toes. We don't want to step on the scene or the idea. And then, of course, everything goes flat. Is that something you've had to?
Oh my God. I did a 2-person show with Jean Villepique. Do you know who she is, don't you?
Yes, I believe so.
Oh, she's a fantastic actress. She's a very dear friend of mine. Her improv, she's just grounded, so interesting, makes the best choices. And so we did it. This was years ago. We were doing a 2-person show, and we niced each other to death. It was the most boring show. I had so much respect for her, and I think she mutually had so much respect for me. So we don't want to step on each other's toes, and it was awful. And all we wanted from each other is like, you make your biggest choice, and I'll make mine, and we're going to make them work. And that another great lesson in like, damn, we don't have any boys on stage to blame. It's just us.
I think it took me a while in particular to realize that you could still be a jackass and give gifts. And you could not be argumentative and still be, and you cannot have conflict, but still be, I don't know, persnickety, for lack of a better word, and create a situation that is not a situation. I don't know. I'm not saying that well, but
elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, I don't know. I remember when you guys came last time, and we had some shows that we did with Bob, and I beat myself up after one of the shows because I did a scene with him, and I thought, oh no, I caused arguments the entire time afterwards. But I realized later I had given him a few gifts because I thought, oh, he saved this scene. He totally saved this scene. And he may have, because now I don't remember, but I know that since then I've been in scenes in Amoeba and some other people where I have not necessarily always been happy, positive, and an array of boring sunshine the entire time.
Right.
And I've still managed to give gifts, and they haven't always been positive rays of sunshine. And I think people are afraid of being any kind of negative and saying, well, that's okay because your mom took that goat, or, that's just providing information.
And it's funny because we were having a bit of this discussion earlier, because I've seen fight scenes work. I've seen those like kind of negative conflict scenes work before. And so I'm trying to, you're trying to decipher like, so why? And
Yeah.
what I landed it on is like, it's just never fun to hear the same note being rung again and again.
Yeah.
And again. But when you find the variations in that and the layers and levels or whatever, then it becomes an interesting scene. And that is kind of the difference. And I mean, would you say, when I'm improvising, there are certain things that I will do. Like if I'm panicking, I will unnaturally go to a character that is familiar. And I will beat up on myself because it doesn't feel like I wasn't trusting in the moment and just letting it like evolve into something. And I can think of a few times in shows that I've done or whatever that maybe the audience doesn't know, but I have felt as an improviser, like, okay, this is my easy choice. This is a rut for me that a
Mm-hmm.
choice I make constantly, and forget whether I'm giving gifts or what I'm doing. I'm not enjoying it. I'm not surprising myself. And so I don't know, maybe that is rather beating yourself up for like, oh, I was argumentative in the scene, was what you were actually feeling like, oh, I've made a choice that was not, that was so familiar.
Yes.
And I'm good in this. I know I've done great scenes playing this, whatever, but for my own personal, enjoyment and growth, I'd like to do something different. And
Yeah.
There's a click you feel, and sometimes you don't feel the click,
yeah,
and you want to know why. Why didn't I make the click happen? I had all the ingredients, but I didn't feel the click.
right.
I don't know if when you come off stage and you feel like, oh, that was amazing. Everybody was electric. That's what I think of as the click.
Sure. And then sometimes you
So,
do a show where it feels very forced. I think the audience enjoyed it and we all had a good time, but the click, as you're describing it, wasn't there so much, the kind of magic. And I think
yeah.
we're all collectively surprising each other, the audience and us, because they can see us finding things on the spot because we were open to doing it.
Open.
We're,
Yeah. Okay.
open to letting these things happen versus being like, I need to make a choice here, and here's one that I'm familiar with, so I'm going to throw that in there. It may be entertaining, and it certainly furthers the scene. But I know what you're talking about, and I don't really know. Like I think there are certain things you can do to allow that magic or that click to happen, but I don't think there's any surefire way. Piece of advice that I think any improviser can give that will say, if you do this, you can always get into it. Other than trying to be present. Bob's advice always is turning to your partner and really listening and trying to respond in a way that supports what they're saying.
Right.
Thank you guys so much for doing it. Anything else that you wanted to touch base on before?
I feel like there's a lot of stuff that we would love to pick your brain on, and I could probably go for another hour, but at least. But I'm thinking maybe we should wait until you get to Austin, and maybe we'll steal you for a little while and take you for a coffee or something for
Oh,
that.
that would be awesome. I'd love it.
I do want to thank you for saying that phrase, avoiding self-judgment, early on, because I feel like
Yes.
that wraps up nicely a lot of the things we talked about, including, well, basically all of it. So
And that's kind of the
It's
core
common in
of,
life, the self-judgment,
yeah,
yeah.
and it gets us, right?
yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah.
kind of the
So
foundation
us
of becoming an improviser, is to
for
stop
sure. It
judging
will help
yourself.
on stage. So
Yeah. Very good. Good. Well, this was
Thank-
lovely. It was just so good to
yeah,
thank you
meet
so
you guys
much.
again. I look forward to seeing you in Austin.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Can't wait.
All right.
Take care.
Okay, take care.
Take
Thanks,
care.
guys.